Okay, there we go. Have fun.
Okay, continue. I consent. Resume my timer and start. Okay, hi. I'm Mike, he, him. I'm going to talk a little bit about some board games I really like today. I'm not going to try to teach them to you because that would take too long. As it is, I wrote 40 slides about this, so I have to go at about 7.5 seconds a slide if I'm going to keep into 5 minutes. We'll probably go into 7. Sorry. I'm going to tell 2 stories about 18xx games. The first one is basically why I like them so much. And the second one is something I did in the last 6 months to contribute to the community of people who play them. But first, you can have context a little as a treat. 18xx is a family of board games. The very first one was designed by a fellow named Trainception. He called his game 1829. He published it in 1974. Games that came after that were kind of derived from that design borrowed the naming convention. They're all named after years that start with 18, with maybe a few exceptions. Don't worry about that. But that's why it's called 18xx. Great. Now I'm going to tell you the first story, which I've titled A Game Within a Game, my favorite part of 18xx. Let's play a train game. You could be the New York Central. You have a charming little charter, which has all your stuff on it. You've got some station tokens, which have your company logo, which I recently learned are called a company's herald in the case of a railroad company. That may be of interest to some people. The New York Central has some money, and if the person who's invited to play you this game is a nice person, they will have given you poker chips and not Monopoly money. I'm sorry, people who like Monopoly money. And you have a train, which has some scary text about the fact that it's about to disappear. That's a problem for future you. Let's keep going. And as the New York Central, you live in the charming hexagonal town of Erie, Pennsylvania. So on your turn, you're going to build some track over to Cleveland because a train is not very useful unless it can go to 2 places. And then you run your 2 train on the track from Erie to Cleveland, which means you get $10 and you get $40 from Cleveland. And now you've got $50. And on your next turn, you'll spend that money to make more track. And now Erie's going to be worth $30. And maybe you buy another train. And then you can run for 70 plus 70, and that's $140 a turn, which is great because, of course, you're not alone in this quaint hexagonal version of the Midwest. There are other railroads out there who would like to make more money than you. And so here's the core gameplay loop of this, right? We make more and better track, buy more and better trains, earn more money, repeat, and win. But I promised you a game within a game. So this is the game. And it kind of looks like maybe I've cropped off some of the boards. So let's show the rest of the board. Oh, those aren't hexagons at all. Somebody zoom and enhance on those parts that are not hexagons. Does that say stock market? Oh, it does. Yeah, see, this story sort of kind of started with a lie. You can't be the New York Central. Sorry. You're actually a 19th century 1%er who owns just enough of the New York Central that you get to tell it what to do. You have your own pile of money and your own portfolio of stock in these railroad companies. And the real way to win the game is to have the most money for yourself. And you can't just move money between your accounts for your company and yourself, because that would be embezzlement. There are rules about that sort of thing, even though there aren't really rules about insider trading at this point in time. But that's what hooked me. There's this investing stock market game with a railroad game inside of it, right? There are the players get turns where they buy and sell stock and try to manipulate the market. And the companies sometimes get turns where they do all that train stuff that I spent the first half of this story talking about. And whoever has the most shares of a company gets to make all the decisions for it. And that's nice sometimes, but also it means that if that company really needs to buy something and doesn't have any money, that player is on the hook to pay for it. Which can also lead to some nasty sorts of gameplay where you put a company in a bad position and then sell all your shares, and now it's Steve's problem to solve on the next turn. That's all very interesting to me, and that's what hooked me on this. There's lots of reasons to love these games. That's what got me. And we're at 4 minutes, and here's the start of my second story. Arts and crafts, 18xx, papercraft, and COVID-19. So print and play. 18xx is a tiny slice of board gaming. Now, board gaming is growing bigger and bigger, and it turns out so is 18xx. But when I started this sort of thing in 2010, to get a copy of this game, 1846, meant sitting on a wait list for 3 years for the one guy who made them to make one in his basement and send it to you. I didn't feel like doing that. So I borrowed a copy from the person who taught me. I redrew every component of the game myself in Inkscape so that I wasn't violating copyright law by photocopying it. I printed it, I laminated it, I cut it out, and that's what all those pictures you've seen so far have been. I made this. Since then, it's a lot easier to get 1846 legally, and it's a lot easier to get a lot of these games, but there's a strong tradition of printing and making our own games among the people who love this stuff. Which brings us to 2038. Tycoons of the Asteroid Belt, designed by Tom Lehman, who, if any of you play board games, you probably recognize that name from things like Race for the Galaxy and some other stuff that is pretty popular. He's a pretty big deal. But in 1995, he made this 18XX game in air quotes. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far too fast. 2038 is an investing game with an asteroid mining game wrapped inside it, which is kind of cool. It's not quite the same. And it has some companies in it that have some really evocative and clever names, like Resources Unlimited and Lucky, the independent pilot, and the Asteroid League, which we always just call the AL when we're playing it, and Ring Construction Corporation, which is my favorite. But this game was published with kind of a shoestring art budget, even though the person writing it was pretty awesome. And so the heralds for these companies are kind of disappointing. And even though I'm going through this presentation at a breakneck pace, I'm going to linger on these kind of disappointing logos for a couple of seconds and also catch my breath. And the RCC logo here with the little ring is the best one in the game. There are a total of 10 corporations and 6 of these independent pilots who got stuck just with numbers. And I thought to myself, well, I just redrew all of 1846. Can I do better? So I fired up my program and I started making heralds for these companies. I was a particular fan of the idea of doing the Centurion helmet for Mars Mining as a little nod to Marvin the Martian. So I worked on that, and this was about 2014. And then I got distracted for a few years. I had a couple kids. I called a bunch of square dances. It really got in the way of playing board games that take 4 to 8 hours to play. But then a plague showed up. And square dancing pretty much stopped because a hobby based on 8 people holding hands in a room was not going to fly. The people who I had been playing 18XX with couldn't get together and play anymore, so they went to the internet and were trying to play it there in venues like Discord, where I was hanging out. And it stopped being sit down for 4 hours or 8 hours and play a game. It became post your turn when you have time, and then the next person will get to it. And we play a game over a course of weeks, so I was able to participate. And because I had all this spare time, I had time to turn back to my crazy art project. Another thing that happened that I'm just going to mention to head off the question of, hey, is there a way for me to participate in this from home during the pandemic? Is this website called 18xx.games got launched in March of this year with somewhat perfect timing. It's open source, it's free. They do have a Patreon if you want to help them. I probably should be doing that. But you could play these games online for free yesterday or whatever. So I came back to this and I said, yeah, I can do better. And I decided to revive this project of making this art. And I wrote a letter to Tom Lehman because he's on Board Game Geek and you can just send him a mail and maybe he'll read it. And I said, hey, if I make this art and put this thing together to shove into my copy of the game box, are you cool with me sharing this, on the internet so other people could print it out and do it? And not only did this person who's kind of a celebrity to me get back to me and say, yes, you can share this if you make it. He gave me 2 pages of constructive notes that he said are basically what he would have written if we were collaborating on the design for a reprint of this game, which was kind of awesome and really kicked me into high gear. I'm not going to talk about all the decisions that I put into these stupid logos because that would be another 5 to 7 minute talk at a minimum, but I'll just give you a quick before and after of one of the big game components. So this is the Ring Construction Corp, which I mentioned before is kind of the best one from the original game. This is their charter. This is what I came up with. Obviously, a little inspiration from Michael Okuda and the Star Trek Next Generation controls in here, but there's the logo. Here's all 10 of the major corporations stacked up on my table. I picked out a different typeface for each of the company names to go with their logos, which was also fun. And this is almost my last slide. Here's the whole set. Mars Mining has the Centurion helmet still that I was really proud of. RCC was still my favorite from the original game and the one that came together the fastest. The 6 independent pilots are down at the bottom. They didn't have a color palette in the base game, so I stuck to black and white for them. And then the last element of this story is that while 2038 is a little too different from all these train games to make its way onto 18xx.games that I mentioned before, there was still another clunkier website where some of these games happen and exist, and my art is now available there if you want to play 2038. I would not recommend it as a starting point, but I did this thing and now it's on the internet, and that's really exciting to me. So I'm obliged to show this slide because of the art pack I used for this presentation. Thanks very much. I'm going to stop talking now. Any questions? They should be about this pretty stuff I made.